Been a good minute, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
Been here, but I haven't seen you up front and center.
Okay.
Lucas, how's it going?
All good. I didn't get an answer. Why do you have that in Portuguese?
It's based on your local area. I don't have it in a specific language.
Okay. Oh, okay. Because the way I hear that message, it sounds like it's coming from your side. So I understand now.
It's all Google.
It's crazy. Right. We're waiting for Christian.
And a few others, yeah.
And a few
So
others. Yeah. Cool.
I can also confirm it comes through in English on my side, just to reassure you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying it.
Ritz, thanks for being here. Robin, good to see you.
Yeah, sorry for missing last week.
No worries, we'll get you caught up. Okay. Until Christian gets here, I will pull up what we will begin going over. Christian's supposed to pop in so that we can go over that budget concern that was brought up in the chat earlier this week. Camera on so you guys can see I'm fully paying attention. I'm just okay. Here we go. Oh, there's Christian.
Sorry, I'm late.
Take the stage.
Hey, everybody. Hope everyone's good.
Hey.
Everyone get a chance to see the whole budget doc that we agreed to last year?
Took a look at the sheet you shared and the bounty part.
Yeah, that's the one we discussed last year. The only thing I added was, given the demand for the bug bounty, rather than have a hybrid use case, I just added a separate bounty specifically for that program because I think it makes sense. And I just upped the total price $300K. So if you minus the OSO budgets, which don't have anything to do with the actual treasury request, where it puts us right close to 30 or 3.2 million. And I just needed to make sure everyone's okay with this because I need to update the budget committee to make sure that the proposal Lawrence is drafting reflects the new ask today, if possible. But I wanted to make sure that we had this or utilize this session to make sure everyone's happy with what's in the doc. I'll share the link to it on the thread here too. But the line item 11 right there is for the bug bounty. And that figure can be whatever y'all want it to be.
I just have a question on this. Is this for developer experience people to set up the bug bounties, or who's actually running this bug bounty?
So that's so everything in this is basically going to come under OSC discretion for how we manage and execute. So we can find the different parties. We're just making sure we put in the request to have the funding there. So however we see fit to do this, but this is like the maintainer retainer program and stuff in the incubation. We can use some frameworks like that for managing some of these budget requests, but the bug bounty probably requires a separate framework for us to work out for the details of and come to a conclusion on how we want to do that.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
More likely than not, if we were to get this approved in the budget, right? Apologies. Here we go. What we are looking at here, primarily the bug bounties are going to come from TSC, OSC, very small potential from products, but OSC and TSC mainly. And then there's going to have to be a part of that program that allows us to feature or take on community featured bugs. So again, that oversight's going to come to us, but the administration or even RFP for who's going to go on that bug bounty or who's going to say, hey, I had a fix for it. We're going to need the TSC for validation. And of course,
Well,
other developers that they would choose. And
this ties into I think the purpose of the Security Council, which is the OSC owned at least policy.
yeah,
Even though they answered TSC, that's our cross collaboration. But essentially, like the Ledger hotfix that went through for Node 1.14. Essentially, Mike Hornan was the one who found the bug, reported it. I was the incident manager on it, so I made sure we had the incident response process, followed the policy per the Security Council, made them aware, and then comms came out with the release not to delay the hard fork, informed ICC, all that fun stuff. But because we didn't have a bug bounty program, there was no reward for Mike Hornan doing that and testing it and working through it. So we could tie it in that the validators of this process could be that the Security Council validates the technical or like the issue, whether it's an incident, and maybe the rewards also associated with the level incident that's assigned to the response. And then they get TSC, or we may even want TSC approval to reward the bug and before the OSC makes it the discretion to pay it out. It's y'all's call. So either way, the OSC has to sign off that we are okay to pay out that piece. But we could get recommendations along the way that this is validated, tested, and was an issue, and we should reward that person. Rather than tie it to, and then we just lock it down based on the scope of the projects that the bug bounty program covers, i.e. things under Intersect, and we could scope it specifically for maybe GovTool and Core Cardano, and maybe a few incubation projects if we want to. Completely at y'all's discretion. Donovan?
Just an administrative question. What happens if there isn't a full spend of the allocated budget in a given year for the bug bounty program due to a lack of bugs being reported to cover the whole budget? Does it just carry forward and we top it up to the same level as before, or do we take the same amount every year? Does it get revised? What's the administrative side of that?
So this is my best guess because I need Lloyd and Lawrence to go over their process for it. But I see it like the one option you mentioned where it never goes above 300K. And if we roll it over, the request coming from the Treasury only reimburses what was spent. Or it just goes back to Treasury or process, something like that. If it doesn't get utilized, and then it gets included in the next budget proposal. Because I don't think it's something that we build a big cash deposit on when it's just a reward mechanism. Robin?
Hey, yeah, I think there's probably 100 ways of constructing this kind of framework, and I think there's also the opposite side that pops in my mind right away when I hear your question, Jonathan. What happens if we don't have enough funds in this bucket? And there's another bug that has been fixed by a community member, and we run out of funds. What happens then? He needs to wait for the next 6 months, or that I think there's many questions, and I think maybe it would be good to have this framework more defined before. Maybe I'm not completely sure about the process from here. Because right now it's just bug bounty for Cardano, but are we going to lay this out until next week, or how's it going?
Yeah, so there's we definitely need to just make sure the request is in to have funds for it, but yeah, we need to work out the framework for this. And decide when we want to put that on the agenda to flush it out. We're focusing the incubation contribution ladder right now, just because those 2 documents are ready to go. But I could put some thoughts together or work with some of y'all if you're willing to draft up what it should look like, and then bring it to the OSC for review. Because the whole reward bounty thing, I have no experience with before. I just know how other things do it. And we can also test, I think the best way to validate it too is through the Security Council, how many incidents come up in 25, and then use that to calibrate 26 for the actual monetary figure for what we expect. And then also the influx of projects that we want to cover. And Moritz, to your question, what we consider core Cardano is everything we migrated originally. I'm open to expand that definition if we want to, but that's everything from Plutus to Node, essentially. The only ones that are debatable are the Cardano Adrestria projects that Arno manages. I'm kind of pushing responsibility to the CF to help maintain that. But those projects barely have anything. Cardano addresses is kind of the only piece with Beck 32. But I do calculate it at like 28 repos, quote unquote, right now. And GovTool, if you count that as one. But they kind of have their own support mechanism, I think. I'll follow up.
Yeah, GovTool's not considered in the 36 that I counted as core, and the 36 includes additional repos that were private that have been made public since the migration. And some of those may have been created as private when the migration took place. So that's, again, part of that review that I'm trying to get through.
Yeah, and we had some supplementary projects that came over after the fact, like Cardano, which I need to figure out what the scope of it is. I think TX Pipe was contracted by IOHK to build that. And then there's Anateus and another one. But those are the only three I migrated post the original migration. And we can go through that list probably with our review next week of OSO. But were there any other questions to what we have in the budget, what we're asking for? Lucas?
Yeah, not specifically on the budget and the process. I just, I'm happy even to help document it and, to see if it's clear as a second pair of eyes. But to what just happened with Mike Horton, and is it possible that we could retroactively reward him for what happened, especially due to the severity of what he found and contributed?
I'm working through that. I just got his acknowledgement that he's okay to be publicly recognized. And the issue is, I think the issue is fully taken care of. We just got to finalize the report from the SC, and then we'll call him out as that. But for monetary compensation, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what.
But it's public already, right?
What's that?
It's public already that he found something. Right?
Yeah, Mike's been talking on Twitter. People know.
Yeah. Officially, he never acknowledged to be acknowledged, but I got it on at least paper now. So,
yeah.
But,
okay.
So
that was basically.
I'm trying to work an avenue to get him rewarded because he should be. I just gotta figure out what there is.
There's a showing to the community as well that it's worth keeping an eye out.
Yeah.
Things and contributing and putting your effort to it. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't want it to be like you work without honor, in a sense. I'm trying to make sure we're not a volunteer, fully driven society. Or I'll just make Adam do everything. He's been the guinea pig since day one.
Any other
Only goes so
questions
far.
here on the budget piece?
Yeah, just to recap for you, Adam, we're just discussing we added 300K to the budget ask. I'm trying to get that ratified with y'all today so I can submit it to the budget committee and make sure it's included in the proposal. But it's to differentiate that there is a bucket for bug bounty specifically for security, and the other one deals with feature enhancement for projects, and we can work out the framework for that later on as well. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so if that's the case, what I would advocate is that we make a policy that any unused funds from this particular spend get rolled forward, because a lot of times with the bug bounty program, some of the white hats won't come forward until the prize is juicy enough, essentially. So if we essentially are constantly paying it forward to increase that potential size, we can attract more and better hackers, essentially, to come and dangle the bait for them to come and try to attack us and point out our weaknesses. So
I'll just bring you up to speed that you're arguing for the opposite of what I was arguing for, which was to make sure that it was always kept at a cap of 300,000. But hey, we're opposed.
Hey, and I think it depends on the scope of projects you're covering. But what we were discussing with Johnny was that it's always the same amount, or the same amount that's requested in the budget, and if it's not utilized, it rolls forward, and we exclude it from the next budget ask. I don't know. That's for our framework to determine.
yeah, remember you're talking about setting $300,000 aside for what is currently a $33 billion ecosystem and likely to grow. So an actual vulnerability has tremendous and huge real world financial impact, well beyond a mere $300,000.
Well, and I think you can tie both together in a way that makes sense, because I agree with both of y'all's sentiments.
Yeah, so something that would be a permanent chain ending bug, how much is that worth to us is what we have to ask ourselves.
One husky.
Exactly.
Robin?
Yeah, I agree on this with Adam. I think to me it makes total sense to build like a how would you say that, to fill the bucket and like roll this forward over time, constantly growing this amount and have more incentive in the future. But I think we also need to see and learn how things go, because we haven't even started, so we don't really know how things will be, how it's taken and used in the end. So I think it's not a small detail that we're talking about. It's important, but I think we need to see and be open to also for change.
Yeah. Also, the determination of the value of the reward based on what is discovered.
Exactly.
But I do believe this is something when we were setting up Intersect that was under discussion, and we did analyze the CF's bug bounty, and it wasn't heavily utilized, for at least for whatever they're covering, if they are. So I imagine at least for 25, that's why I figured 300K was a safe number. It's not too much, not too little, and we can kind of figure out how to poach this and then reevaluate next year.
In my opinion, it's a good start. We just need to see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy with the number where it is. I just think, yeah, like if we can build it up larger over the course of several years to where it's $1 million, on the line or so, that's when you really get people's attention, and that should be our goal, is to actually get the ultimate peer review, which is let the entire world of hackers come and try to attack this blockchain and prove that they can't. Otherwise, they would have claimed, $1 million from us.
It will also make it easier for us to cover more projects in the future.
Yeah, that too. As we're taking on more repositories and more management, there's more likely to be bugs in those various pieces of software. So having more for the smaller little piddly bugs that are, 5 or 10K each, but then still having enough for a nice big payout if there is a mission critical vulnerability discovered, makes sense. So,
Lucas?
Just to clarify, when you say they can find the bug and get $1 million, we would be going through a process and criteria to define the size, the reward. They wouldn't get the whole cake. How does it work?
yeah, so generally speaking, whoever is your head of software security, or your security council in this case, that was originally mandated by the OSC, but now is kind of overseen by the TSC and the board, they would determine the bug criticality level, essentially. Like, is this a 0-day, everything can come to a screeching halt? Is this just a nuisance? Is this a nice to have? And then based on that, we can kind of decide, okay, it fits within this band, ergo we're gonna give out this amount of reward. So yeah, it's not like the first minor bug you find because Moritz made a typo that doesn't really affect anything, you get $1 million. But if it's something actually serious, we could give a huge amount to really reward that person for coming up and disclosing it rather than stealing a bunch of people's money. So.
Yeah, that's why I was proposing that you could use the Security Council and then the TSC to validate what the criticality level is, and then assign some monetary bucket ranges maybe associated with that, but then have the OSC to finalize the actual figure that we pay out depending on the complexity of the issue. Because it's very easy for something to go from a level 4 to a level 1 depending on timelines too. And level 1 is like the whole chain's at risk. At level 5 is just like people need to know about it. I don't know who was first. Robin?
I think I wasn't first. I think Tex was.
Oh. I'm just announcing time again. So we're 20 minutes in now.
Okay, then
we'll
just
go Robin, Jonathan, real fast.
Okay. I think, yeah, for me, I think what would be important here to build into such framework is to make sure that we don't risk any like that we avoid situations where we could be seen as having biased opinions because, I don't know, someone fixes a critical bug, receives much more than the previous one, was someone else, and then voices could be that we favor this person or something. I think there should be some kind of process that eliminates this kind of situation. So maybe in some sense, I don't know if it's possible, but on a timeline, maybe before you actually know who fixed something. Maybe not always possible, but I don't know. Just putting it out here as a thought.
Jonathan?
Yeah, so I'll go back. So the reason I was advocating for a cap each year and always going back to that cap was to set a kind of standardization for how much people would receive to avoid this level of differential, how much people are going to get rewarded based on the same type of bug. Also, the worry about rolling over and increasing the amount like a lottery is it might encourage people to hold off on reporting bugs until the rollover happens in the next budget year or the year after that so that they can get more of a reward. It might incentivize the wrong kind of behavior. Maybe increasing the cap to be more tempting to the person to report it and making that the standard cap each year rather than having it roll over would be a better sort of compromise there, because then you have the juicy reward, but you don't have this, I'll hold off on reporting it because I know I'll get more next year.
Okay. Just
go
ahead, Rob.
No, just comments. Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, just to close this off, I think we're good with 300K for this year. Reevaluate it and test it through 2025. Come up with a good framework and then figure out the mitigation point between what the cap should be, rollover mechanisms, and then reward values. Are we okay to... and then with that, is everyone okay that we have a budget for 3.2 million that we're requesting? And I can send that over and record it to Lauren so that he knows the budget and everything's good. OSC's back it. Because I think we have enough quorum.
I'm very sorry. Just one more thing. The bug bounty is marked red right now. Does it mean this one would be one of the first to drop out of this list?
So what it means is we had to do an analysis way back when of if we have the budget, what are our must-haves, what are our nice-to-haves, and what are like negotiables. Yellow was the negotiables, green were nice-to-haves, and then reds were critical. And I marked this as critical because I think the community 100% wants this. And if we don't offer it, Intersect's going to be at a major loss for any kind of reporting.
Yeah, I agree that they want it. It's definitely been called for, especially for Mike recently, and there doesn't seem to be anything that's covering the gap at the moment, with the CF only covering their own.
Yeah. So that's what I have it marked. But I don't think that that's fully taken into consideration yet, these color categories, until the budget proposals with the D-reps and then the questions start being asked. And we've done some marketing campaigns ahead of time. So I think me and Tex are well versed enough to defend all our ideas as well. And if y'all want to be in any of those conversations of why we came up with the budget, we're more than happy to help facilitate.
I'll say I have no objections to it being proposed to D-reps for this, as long as it's made public well in advance and they're able to have time to deliberate before voting on an actual budget.
100%. Okay. I'll do a quick quorum. If everyone can quickly type yes into the chat. If you're okay with this budget proposal to submit to Lloyd and Lawrence and make sure it's in their written proposal, then we will carry forward. Okay. I'll put my biased answer in there. Okay. Thank y'all. We will carry that forward, and then I'll let Tex get started with incubation. I'm working on the contribution ladder in the background to make sure the framework makes sense to propose to y'all, and then we can get in the nitty-gritty of that next week. But I should have it by latest tomorrow morning. So just bear with me. I've been in meetings 2 12-hour days.
All right, and I'll thank Adam for getting us started. If everyone can just drop your affiliation piece in there, just name, position, so on. Let's switch this over, and for project incubation, we're going to kind of give you guys an overlay. So I haven't taken down this working group yet because it's holding the life cycle framework. The first link, let me actually do. So here's the document that we'll be working in. This is a link to the page that I am on. Basically, we can see the goal here. Find a way to nurture and advance open source projects. We had Alex and Salona and a number of other people that were contributing to this here. Basically, determine who the stakeholders are, what's a rough plan, and what needed research. So all of these core entities that are working on open source were basically consulted or researched in this regard to put together the various documents here. That document culminated here into this project incubation lifecycle framework. Again, this went through the OSC back in June. It looks like June 7th may have been the official date, and I can pull up those meeting minutes if we need to. With this lifecycle framework is where we got the baseline for the acceptance criteria. And so some of the terms have changed a little bit just into what sounds better. Basically, incubation, growth, maturity, and then decline. And there's also one for abandonment, so when something needs to go away. Switch this over here. Adam, go ahead.
Just something that I wanted to note last week, and it just keeps bothering me every time I hear it. I think we should probably change abandonment to the word archival, because abandonment has such a negative connotation to it, whereas just archiving things that have reached their useful life and are no longer necessary, but we're keeping it around for posterity as a memento is much more palatable when we're telling a project or a person that, you know, their thing that they've worked on for the last 5 years is going to be abandoned because it's no longer useful. That doesn't really come over very well.
How about deprecated, or does that have any issue?
Deprecated works, but only if it's superseded by a newer standard. So there are things like that are currently being maintained by Intersect, like the coin selection, Cardano coin selection repository, which literally is only a reference implementation of the original CIP2 coin selection strategy, which didn't even account for native assets. So it's not really being maintained, and there's not really anything to add or remove from it. So it's in a state where we don't need to pay somebody to maintain it, but we do want to kind of keep it around while signaling that we're no longer actively maintaining it. So that's where archival makes more sense than deprecation, because there is no newer formal standard that's been submitted so far.
That's fair.
But yeah, that's just my opinion. It's up for everybody. I know it's in all of these docs that Texas made and people have been working on for the last year or so. But it just, it bothers me every time I read abandonment phase.
Yeah, makes sense.
Happy to change it.
Were you suggesting some alternative, or maybe I missed that?
He said archival phase, especially since if you see in the key characteristics, you see in point 3 that archiving of the project resources for accessibility and legacy preservation. It does directly match one of the key characteristics of the phase. So archival phase might be okay.
Yeah.
Does it imply to you that it's not really any more like, if I see something archived, I would not necessarily pull it out to use it as a reference, because I also have some kind of negativity to it attached, like not like legacy, or not like deprecation, not like abandonment. That's the worst, as you said. But archive for me is also a bit like it hasn't been touched in a long time. It's I mean that's true, and it's not wrong. But it also comes with some kind of feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it is the official end of active development and support. So,
but it could be even completed, right? It could be the final stage where you just don't need to continue. So yes, you archive, but somehow archive is, maybe it's too much of detail. I don't know.
Texas also added retirement in here as a potential option, or the out to pasture phase, or leading granny into the sea. There's lots of options there for saying that we've arrived at the end of life.
I vote the latter one, just hands down.
I would also go for archive in the, I mean, based on that on these terms you just brought up, I like archive the most. Yes.
Well,
I would also highlight for everyone that the phase prior to this here is the decline phase, right? So there's already something that is quote unquote lighter than archival or whatever other term we land on using. So if they are in decline, they already know that they are at risk of whatever other term is coming. So this is a way to lessen the blow, if you will.
Yeah, the idea of decline, and if we have an issue with that, I could like the phrase "return to green," kind of like it marks that you're no longer within the stipulation of your current project classification. So you need work to do to go back to it, or after a year time frame, you'll be reevaluated at the decline or retirement phase. So it needs to have at least enough stipulation that you don't want to be associated with that tier, but not offensive enough that you hate that a project on it isn't necessarily negative per se, like coin selection.
So, sometimes you do want to be in that phase, though. I mean, like, there's a reason why, like, the global habit of financial industries and airports and stuff still running software on COBOL is not something that should be encouraged. You know, at some point we should archive the older projects and get newer software in there that can be maintained by a newer, younger audience. So going into decline and archive isn't necessarily the worst. You've had your time in the sun, you served your mission. Now it's time to get out of the way and let the next generation take over. So
yeah, my whole thing is like the fact that addresses was going on for so much time with lack of attention. If we mark it as this on a public dashboard, it would incentivize the people to take care of it. So that's my alternate objective with it.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's definitely an indicator. Like, hey, like either get some activity going or we're going
Yeah.
to archive this sort of thing. So
Basically. Because everyone loves how they get reported on X. So. So are we voting then that we're going to keep it decline and archive then? Or change decline to return to green?
Decline for reference was originally sunset.
I like decline.
Okay. I think we're at quorum for decline and then archive for the last phase. Okay.
Archival or archive?
archive phase.
Yeah. So from the top, that leaves us with incubation, growth, maturity, and maintenance, decline, archive.
Seems reasonable.
Not unreasonable.
Oh yes, not unreasonable. Yes, the constitutional language. Yes.
We get a temperature check on that.
I'm not going to use those two words ever again. Yep, I'm good with it. I tuned into those 2 days of the Constitution. All I heard was temperature check, temperature check, temperature
Man,
check.
and what was so sad about that is the day before, when the cameras weren't rolling, it was a whole day of going through every single article and discussing each line and paragraph. Like, it was so productive. If that had been on TV or YouTube.
Yeah. I'm sad I didn't see that.
Okay, I'm gonna try something here.
Okay. How did y'all want to go through the sections? Is there any specific points that y'all read through that you'd like to address and then start from there, maybe? Lucas?
Guys, can I just share my screen for a second and throw a few ideas at you, and then I'll quiet up. And I don't want to be rewriting any words or anything on the main document. But yeah, let me just share my screen. Is that okay?
Yep.
I started a poll if you guys go down the triangle or if you see the notification there. So, you know.
Okay. So, like I said, I'm trying to see this from the applicant's point of view, and already acknowledging that I'm not that person, a bit like Adam, that knows all the ins and outs and all the lexicon is very familiar to them. So I'm thinking of the likes of Vesper that was just putting in Catalyst proposals to onboard to open source things, or other projects on Cardano. So what I had here in my notes is. The workflow, for example, we had spoken of making a more presentable view of this. Maybe this was already on the roadmap, but again, I want to say and make myself available to draw this up either on Miro or on Whimsical. Miro would be more zoomable. Whimsical is a bit more like this format, but reorganized. So Christian, ping me directly, or if you greenlight that you would value this effort, let me know, and I could try to do this. By the way, I do have 3 years of business process management, so workflows and this kind of thing is something that I've spent or 3 years negotiating in 8 more projects in banking. So yeah, I think I'm sort of somewhat eligible to try to take this on.
I'm happy
but yeah,
for
the
you.
goal here. Yeah.
Feel free.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. So the goal here would be to start preparing materials that we can publish and to make them enticing for people, even though, so our goal is not just to take on, to bring on board people that are already very in the weeds in terms of open source, but to invite any project to open source things. So that's why I wanted to make sure we have those resources and that we have these as tools to take to meetings. So we can, when we're trying to onboard a project that's not open source to open source, this is like clear to them. So this is one of the things. And now that we were talking about these stages, incubation, growth, maturity, maintenance, decline, and archive, maybe we could have those somewhere in a section of this, or see how those stages would relate with these. So because I feel like more than or within this, there's those stages that people need to effort to be in the right
Yeah,
point.
it's going to be tied into the pre-submission where they have to do a self-assessment, and they need to have resources to know what those categories are ahead of time. And then the project adoption is where the OSC TSC determines the maturity of the project coming in. And a way other foundations have done it is where they mandate that you go through the incubation, even if it's only 30, 60 days before you automatically go to the other phase. That way you get used to the processes, have chance to adopt everything, and then you go to a mature status if you already have the requirements there. So there's another way we could put that into the framework.
Yeah. So zooming out, there's like project submission there, and there's here some points where we would evaluate and TSC would evaluate things. There could be a point here somewhere where we actually sit with projects, so we triage them a bit, or maybe the message with them back and forth a bit to understand what they're about. But looking at this type of experience, again, for a project that is not that familiar with open source, but that it's open source curious and would like to come and have a word about how their project could be brought in within the open source office, I think we could maybe downsize this a bit, and then in a one-to-one call or in a call, take people over things like, I made note here, like maintainer's file or the IP policy agreement. It's something that for someone that doesn't know what it is, they simply, maybe they're going to become shyer to submit this form just by looking at it like this. I like the one-page approach, but that's my feedback. And yeah, I'm gonna quiet down. I think this is the main things that I wanted to share and show you my angle on how I'm seeing I can help. So please keep in contact.
Yeah. By all means, as Adam puts, I put too much detail all the time. So if we can simplify it from the user perspective, by all means. If you go back to the workflow real fast too.
Sorry.
Right after the pre-submission steps, we do have optional working group peer reviews. And maybe that's where we coordinate with them to help them understand what their goals are, and kind of get that. It's right at the top, right above submit project, where this is the working groups under the OSC can curate this process potentially and review stuff.
Here,
I'm thinking commercialization working group and open source library working group for those two areas, and provide feedback before going in.
It's top right.
It's not right.
No,
Top
I
right.
said it's top right. He was in the left there, or so it's
optional working group peer review. Got it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And I think we could also, if OSC wants to, maybe even consider we need their recommendation for the project before we add it to the agenda, unless it's an urgent item or something. I don't know.
Yeah. One thing as well that now looking at this here, between the relationship of how TSC is kept in the loop about the projects that are being incubated, maybe we could have some looping even when the project is already being maintained in the maintenance stage, where from time to time we report, OSC touches base with TSC on how projects are doing that are being incubated.
And maybe this is where the tooling working group comes in, Adam, since it has product in there too, and potentially their projects go through this as well.
Yeah, and that was the idea of the triage group, that's still getting its feet and its processes together, is that we don't expect a new project to know that they belong to OSC or product or TSC. So we're going to help steer them in the correct direction. And then after that triage is when, the triage group will be like, oh, this is an obvious fit for OSC. And then we can kind of like take them in under the project incubation life cycle and kind of begin the coaching from there.
Yeah.
So we probably still will need that big like omnibus form just for helping us to triage, because they may not know what they don't know. And if they come straight to the OSC form, for example, and we end up going, oh, well, actually, you should probably be under product or innovation or marketing or whatever, then they're going to end up having to do the big long form anyway. So I would say, you know, we definitely have room for improvement on that big long form, but exactly how much we can cut out with an eye specifically to open source is hard to determine.
Yeah, well, and I think with the big long form, everyone's going to get what they need out of it. It's just committees before they adjourn to review the project need to know all those boxes are checked ahead of time. So if we can standardize one process for everything, because the incubation should be the same for everyone, at least how projects are classified. And my other thing I was thinking about was even utilizing this even for projects that aren't under the Intersect umbrella for anything OSC else funds, i.e. we can look at their public repositories and still pull out assessment criteria. And that can still be our vetting mechanism, even though they're not under our umbrella, quote unquote.
Yeah, and I noticed this says Intersect project incubation, not necessarily open source office.
Yeah. It just meant any project that's going to end up under our GitHub, this is the process, is what I started with for it. So theoretically, TSC.
Maybe this could be the full blown for that purpose, or like with bigger projects that are already like mature open source wise, and we could have an open source, smaller like form of interest to express interest by projects on Cardano.
Yeah, maybe we do
Just
something simpler to start, and then more details as they prove that, or once we kind of category fit where they go.
Cheers.
Sebastian? Feel free to just talk, Sebastian.
Sorry. In the past, we did we launched this kind of efforts. I mean, the Cardano ecosystem launched in the past years similar efforts. For example, Catalyst intended in some periods to launch this kind of programs, incubation programs, with low success. I think the community in general is not susceptible to participate in this kind of programs. I don't know why. I don't know. We have to research about why people is not susceptible to participate in this kind of opportunities. But talking about Catalyst, I think we have this incubation program has two ways. One, we can launch the program and wait for people come to the program, fill in this form, for example. Or the other way is to go to the projects with a previous study of what kind of projects we go. We have this huge database that is Project Catalyst. This Catalyst is an incubation fund, but it's also a huge database of projects in the ecosystem, because all the most important and talented and hard and with that are working continuously in the ecosystem are receive some kind of funding from Catalyst. So we have this kind of database to identify those projects that have some kind of qualities to receive some kind of support without they ask for it, for that support. That's my first idea in my mind. Thanks.
Yeah, well, the whole idea behind this comes from like Linux Foundation, Cardano Native Computing Foundation. The reason I put this process here is because I want to make sure that the projects that do have interest also line up with Intersect's goals, because Intersect takes on the liability of making sure that their success is there, and all these services. And that's why the open source office, the open source committee is here. Because you have all the guidance you need from committee layers, but then you have delivery assurance in the open source office to directly facilitate those project needs and help out and guide these things, community management, etc. So hopefully that gives us a higher success rate than maybe Catalyst has. But I do think both of your avenues work. You keep the door open for anyone who has interest. We already got 4 people from previous talks I've had last year And then you do have the maybe you go to certain projects, because if we also want to support certain projects with the maintainer program, we got to go knock on their door if we have interest, if they haven't submitted. So
Sure, I'm referring, for example, when we make some kind of a marketing study or some feasibility study in these opportunities, weaknesses, and all this stuff that we make regularly to study some kind of market, right? We can do the same with projects, independent of their origin. We can identify first what projects are in some kind of potential in the near future, and they lack some kind of support. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, and to be quite honest, Intersect needs to focus on the projects on this program for its validity outside of the governance side of stuff. So they become the lifeblood for why Intersect exists outside of governance, treasury, and all that fun stuff. So definitely, I'm trying to tie the two together. Tex?
Sorry. I was just going to share. I made a few updates to the page here. Obviously, moving the working group was quite aged. So what I've done is I moved the framework up under basically OSA deliverables, and then underneath that, I put the working group as the Archive Foundation. And then in here, as the vote indicated, all yes, as I saw, I did get this changed here down at the bottom to Archive.
Okay. And then a subset of this would be the acceptance criteria.
When it's finalized, yeah, so.
Yeah, we got 8 minutes left. So this can become the agenda item for next week if we want to go into granular detail. Is there any specific points people want to address within the document? Or anything we should add that's not there right now? Or does everyone need some time to read through it more again?
I'll be reading up a bit more on it, but I don't think I'll have much to contribute for now.
I have to say, great job with the metrics in each stage. Really well crafted. Congrats.
Thank you. I have to hand that off to Salona from last year. She knew what she was doing. That's why I handed it to her.
Okay, yeah, we have a standard. We have a standard, yeah, there. But really well. Really good metrics.
There's a process step workflow here already. Do you know who did this one?
Which one?
Sorry, I was in the docs. There's a page on the docs that has this process step. It's on this one. I'll drop the link on the chat.
Oh, I will highlight that last meeting it was said to bring that workflow diagram up to the top for people to have an overview before reading the text. I don't see that.
It's right there in the link, right below it.
Oh, right. I see. I thought it would be like there, like it is at the bottom.
I can make it there. That was my immediate quick solution. So that workflow you're talking about, Lucas, that one is for how the open source office manages items. So it won't, it's more kind of like project support stuff or anything that we deal with as a department. So it's way lower than this process.
Sure, but I was asking as well who did it in terms of what tool was used. Maybe we can align and not.
That was before Tex. I had 2 Twig guys helping me, and I can find out what they used.
Okay.
George is still a
I'll
good
share
guy.
some of this. Thanks.
Yeah. I translated that to him to make it pretty because my diagrams are always a nightmare to start. Just so y'all are aware, one of my worst engagements ever as a project manager, I had no tools and I had to use Microsoft Paint for workflows. So anytime they changed it, I had to go re-edit the entire thing in hand draw.
When was this? How many years
This is
ago?
for ServiceNow, the giant conglomerate, but for workplace services or facility management, they didn't give us any apps.
Yeah, but there's some free ones as well for PPM and all. Visagi,
Yeah.
for example.
We'll learn that after the fact.
Cheers.
There's web-based ones as well.
Yeah. Major lessons learned there. But if you need a paint professional, I'm here. So. Okay, then I think we're good with the life cycle framework then, with the categories, the assessment there. Workflow, we'll hand that off to you, Lucas, to make it prettier and then come from that point of view. If you need me, chime in, please. And then homework is to read through this framework and make sure the acceptance criteria lines up with our goals.
Cheers.
Thank y'all. And I'll have a contribution letter out tomorrow morning from the looks of it.
Yeah.
Thanks for pushing that. Cheers.
Yep. Thank y'all.
Just thank you.
Thanks.